My name is Michelle Hager. I'm the director of the SJSU Writing Center. And two of our lead tutors here, Alex and Natalie, are going to start discussing and running us through some activities based on what we call one of our homegrown handouts, so a writing resource that we've created about offensive stereotypes in creative writing. And that's going to be their focus for the remainder of this session. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex and Natalie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Zvargulis, and my buddy.
Hi, I'm Natalie.
So yes, as Michelle said, we are two writing tutors here at San Jose State, and we're happy to be walking you through the handout, and then also we'll be having some fun discussion activities and even some creative writing. So to start us off, the title is Offensive Stereotypes in Creative Writing. And yes, Natalie is going to share her screen so we can, follow along.
Can everyone see that? Can people see it? Okay, great.
Cool.
Yes, we're good, Natalie.
So yeah, to start us off, we should probably define what a stereotype is. So, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, a stereotype is most frequently now employed to refer to an often unfair or untrue belief that many people have about all people or things within a particular characteristic. When we perpetuate stereotypes in writing, we give the impression that these beliefs are facts. And this widespread misinformation affects the way that individuals from marginalized groups are perceived and treated. Therefore, it is important to have a working knowledge of existing stereotypes so as not to replicate them in our own creative writing.
These depictions are harmful because they perpetuate negative generalizations, parodies, and misconceptions about entire groups of people. This is not to say that writers set out to offend or to demean. On the contrary, many writers are well-intentioned people who want to include diverse characters in their work. However, these earnest attempts can fall short and cause unintentional pain when writers are not aware of existing stereotypes. Furthermore, these portrayals have a real-world impact. They can influence readers and leave them with inaccurate impressions of diverse cultures, genders, and sexualities. Common stereotypes in media include the white savior, spicy Latina, sassy Black woman, manic pixie dream girl, amongst many others.
So, some specific examples of stereotypes in media. The white savior is a narrative that outwardly appears to be about the accomplishments of a BIPOC, Black Indigenous person of color, character, yet features a white person as an integral part of this success. What makes this narrative so damaging is that it implicitly tells audiences that BIPOC individuals, rather than standing up for themselves, require benevolent white people to rescue them. Moreover, issues of prejudice and inequality are often solved by the end of the book or movie. Voila. This downplays the devastating impact of systemic racism by presenting audiences with a neat and easy solution, wherein the white person saves the day at the end of the story. Many films are guilty of this stereotype. One well-known example is the novel turned film, The Help. This narrative focuses on a white woman in the 1960s South who writes a book on the abusive conditions that Black women faced in their work as housekeepers and nannies for white families. Many critics, including some of the actors who were involved with the movie, have pointed out that this story makes it appear as if social change only happens because of liberal white individuals.
Another stereotype is a fantasy race based on an ethnic identity. While basing fantasy species off of real-life groups of people is not inherently offensive, it frequently leads to hurtful caricatures of real-life ethnicities and physical characteristics. Examples can include non-human characters, such as orcs, goblins, dwarves, and aliens. Some writers might give these species physical traits that resemble racist images of Black individuals, Jewish individuals, Arab individuals, and more. Other writers might closely base a fantasy religion off of a real-life culture and include disrespectful or inaccurate details that are harmful to real-world members of that culture or religion. One example of this is the alien slave owner Watto from the Star Wars prequel films. Various critics have noted that Watteau embodies racist ideas about both Jewish and Arab people, both in his physical appearance and in his personality traits. Furthermore, the fantasy genre in general tends to associate the color white with forces of good and the color black with the forces of evil. This is reflected in implicitly racist dichotomies, such as blonde elves and dark-skinned goblins or orcs.
Another stereotype that can be harmful is the disability superpower. This stereotype refers to the tendency to depict fictional people with physical disabilities as having some kind of superpower that minimizes or negates their disability. Writers might intend for this depiction to empower people with disabilities. However, these kinds of stories can send the implicit message that these individuals are only valuable members of society if they have a gift to make up for their physical disability. Similar narratives exist around people with mental illnesses. Such stories sometimes portray the specific mental illness inaccurately and often indicate that individuals with mental illness must have extraordinary abilities to make up for their impairment. Various books and movies feature a tortured artist or a tortured genius, and these stories can be problematic because they romanticize illness and often indicate that creativity is the direct result of pain. That furthermore, these narratives falsely imply that people who seek therapy will become less creative as a result of treatment. One example of the disability superpower is the titular character in Marvel's Daredevil comics, who is blind but has miraculously enhanced senses. While this story does portray a disabled person in a heroic light, some audiences have argued that it does not accurately depict the real-life experiences of blind individuals. Instead, Daredevil's powers make his blindness practically a non-issue.
Another stereotype is a token BIPOC or LGBTQ+ character. These characters tend to lack a personality outside of their cultural identity or LGBTQ+ sexuality and/or gender. Examples can include the Black best friend trope, where the character embodies all stereotypes associated with Black individuals and exists only to support the white protagonist. Teen movies and rom-coms alike feature a preppy blonde protagonist and her supportive Black friend who exists to give advice and tell jokes. Similarly, the gay best friend trope generally features a gay man who acts as a sassy companion to the female protagonist and has no complexity outside of his stereotypical traits. The 2013 film GBF spoofs this stereotype with a narrative about three high school girls competing for the attention of their gay classmate in hopes that he'll increase their popularity.
So these are just some of the examples of stereotypes, but thankfully there are alternate ways to write characters and plots to avoid such stereotypes. So firstly, write multiple characters from the same group so there isn't one token representative. Additionally, people are often friends with those with whom they can relate to. So for instance, rather than having a single gay character in a group of straight characters, a friend group might be made up of multiple LGBTQ+ individuals.
Write BIPOC characters who have agency, complexity, and the ability to fight their own battles. Instead of having a white character advocate for, speak for, and fight for people of color, give characters of color the opportunity to speak and advocate for themselves.
Could also write characters who live with their disability, rather than giving them a superpower that effectively takes away their disability.
And write disabled characters who have their own character arc and do not exist purely as a source of inspiration for able-bodied people.
You could write fantasy characters that are not based on real-world groups of people, or write characters that are based off groups you are more familiar with so that they can have the necessary complexity.
Give BIPOC and LGBTQ+ individuals their own character arcs with their own goals and desires, rather than making their entire lives revolve around white and straight characters.
You could also run your book by the Bechdel test, which is named after Alison Bechdel. This test measures representation of women in the media. A story passes the Bechdel test if it has at least 2 female characters who have names and talk about something other than a man.
You could also run your book by a sensitivity reader. Sensitivity readers will read unpublished manuscripts and give feedback on cultural inaccuracies, biases, and stereotypes.
As well, don't make your villain the sole BIPOC person in the entire story. Similarly, don't make your villain the sole gay character or sole disabled character.
Especially, don't kill every BIPOC, LGBTQ plus, or disabled character. This sends the message that these characters, and by extension, real-life people who are members of these groups, are unimportant.
And overall, make sure that your characters are complex, realistic individuals who are not defined by a stereotype. And so for our activity, we are thinking that y'all can get into groups and discuss the activity that's on the handout, which is there are 5 prompts. So examine these passages and identify what kind of stereotype is at play. This first one, a white woman shows up in medieval China and single-handedly rescues an entire village from invaders. She marries the village magistrate. So this is an example of one of the prompts, and we're going to put you into 5 rooms after we read through each prompt. So yeah, there's number 1.
Number 2 is the book centers on a group of 4 friends. Cora, a cisgender woman. Agatha, a trans woman. Jupiter, a cisgender man. And Jim, a cisgender man. The story is about Cora's love triangle with Jim and Jupiter. Agatha just pops up whenever someone is talking about issues pertaining to the LGBTQ plus community.
Third prompt. In a new animated fantasy TV show, there are various fairy protagonists and antagonists. Most of the protagonists are elves and are portrayed as blonde and blue-eyed. Most of the antagonists are demons with dark skin.
The 4th one is, this Oscar-nominated film is about the incredible journey of a Black civil rights activist from the perspective of the white man who gave her a job at his company.
And finally, 5th one, my latest novel is about a woman with OCD. As a result of her fixation on tiny details, she becomes America's most famous consulting detective.
So yeah, you'll be split into different breakout rooms, and your task is just to figure out which stereotype applies to these questions, or to these questions.
Hi, welcome back.
I'm gonna reshare my screen and go back into presenting mode. So yeah, for this first question, identify the stereotype. Does anyone want to put in the chat or say out loud what they think the stereotype is here? Or if you see more than one.
Where did all my people go?
They were scared of the breakout room.
Oh.
Is that what happened? Oh, okay.
That was fun.
Got 10 people here. Still got 10 strong.
There we go. Oh, there we go.
But we did lose a lot.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay.
So I'm sorry. What was the question?
Here,
identify the stereotype for this first example. A white woman shows up in medieval China and single-handedly rescues an entire village from invaders. She marries the village magistrate. Yes, white savior, Carmen. Yep.
Yeah.
Can we think of any other white savior narratives? I can think of the, is it like a Tom Cruise movie where he goes and it has to do with the Great Wall of China? I don't know. And then there's that football star one with Sandra Bullock. I don't know. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? I'm really bad with movie names.
No, I would say also Atlantis animated Disney movies, or I don't know if that's Disney, but a lot of animated kids movies from back then definitely had this trope in them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, Blindside. Yes. Thank you, Lakmini. Yeah, definitely. And even with Atlantis, they had white hair. So it's to add that exoticness to them. But yeah, okay. We can
go to the next one.
slide. Yeah. So the book's on a group of 4 friends. Cora, a cisgender woman, Agatha, a trans woman, Jupiter, a cisgender man, and Jim, a cisgender man. The story is about Cora's love triangle with Jim and Jupiter. Agatha just pops up whenever someone is talking about issues pertaining to the LGBTQ plus community. So yeah, feel free to put it in the chat box or talk about,
Yeah, definitely tokenism. Can you think of any other books or movies that have a token character? I mean, I'm sure you can think of a lot. I think it appears a lot.
Honestly, I don't know if you guys know the show Sex Education, which is like really praised for its diversity. And like I've seen all 3 seasons. It is a great show, but this is like the one thing that does bother me about it is that like the 2 main characters are still cis straight white people. And then like the main boy has a black gay best friend who like has his own character arc for sure, but like it still bothers me because it's definitely still there no matter how hard they try to make it a good show.
Yeah, that's a really good example. I mean, yeah.
Also, I just actually saw the, so Hanno, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but the scene from Hidden Figures where a white supervisor takes down a sign marking a bathroom as whites only, which did not occur in real life as part of the whole white savior discussion. That's a good one. Hanno, okay. And then Carmen says like the legend of Bagger Vance. I don't know if y'all know what that's a reference to. I'm pretty bad at pop culture, actually. Oh, it's with Will Smith. Okay. But yeah, next one, I guess. And you can read this one if you want.
So in a new animated fantasy TV show, there are various protagonists and antagonists. Most of the protagonists are elves and are portrayed as blonde and blue-eyed. Most of the antagonists are demons with dark skin. So what stereotype do people think this one is?
And I think it can have like more than one name too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about fantasy race based on real stereotypes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would also argue colorism. That's another discussion that has been going on recently. That's a good thing to talk about.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is one that I definitely see pop up a lot in fantasy and sci-fi. And yeah.
Like dark elves.
Yeah. Can anyone think of any other examples of this, or like any examples from media?
Yeah, many of the cartoons from my youth as well.
Yeah, I feel like various fantasy TV shows I've read and I've watched and books that I've read definitely fall into this.
Yeah, I feel like Star Wars also just has that issue, and more than just the Watto and the prequels.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like the Sand People.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, no, I feel like that is a fairly common perpetuator of some of these. Because like when we think of all of these fantasy races, we usually will think of Dungeons and Dragons or a game based off of the like races and classes in the Dungeons and Dragon kind of, character building book that you would get. So.
Can move on to the next one.
Yeah. So this Oscar-nominated film is about the incredible journey of a Black civil rights activist from the perspective of the white man who gave her a job at his company.
So, yeah, the stereotype here. What do you think the stereotype here is?
Or I mean, possibly how it could be problematic too.
I don't want to like answer every question, which is why I haven't said anything. But I would say that this is a white savior stereotype again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and definitely just centering the film from the perspective of a white character rather than a Black person who is actually fighting for their own civil rights is pretty problematic. Doesn't even really make any sense.
Yeah.
So I'll go to the last one. And I'll read this. My latest novel is about a woman with OCD. As a result of her fixation on tiny detail, she becomes America's most famous consulting detective. So, what stereotype is this one? Yeah, the disability superpower one.
Yeah, this happens a lot in like crime dramas.
Yeah. Yeah, this particular one is definitely a personal pet peeve of mine. Can anyone think of other pieces of media that falls into this, or like even specifically with mental illnesses, like portraying it as somehow giving a person a kind of superpower rather than actually depicting it realistically?
I mean, the versions of this one are like, I think Monk is one of them. Yeah. The Good Doctor.
I recently watched all of the Avatar series for the first time, and I'd say Toph, the blind character, falls into this too a bit, definitely.
Yeah.
Like also as an art history major, like even just the way our history is like written or taught, like so many artists that they're like, oh my God, they were in such turmoil and created their greatest masterpiece. It drives me insane.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Isn't Sherlock Holmes kind of like one of the originals?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Not just OCD, but also, just not portraying mental illness because I'm pretty sure
the curious thing is, if you go onto YouTube and you start researching, YouTubers who advocate in these spaces, they'll often turn something like on the spectrum, or they don't use that term anymore, but autism as a superpower, to reframe it. It's kind of like taking ownership over something that, someone who's outside that group might appropriate. So for instance, as a person of that group, you would use the term in a way that empowers and frame it in a way that. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I'd like to learn more about, what is off limits when it comes to that, and what's actually complementary.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I think if it's someone who actually has experienced this and is reclaiming it, then that seems very different to me, because they do have the experience to write about it with honesty and accuracy, but still reclaim it as a superpower. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know how we're doing on time, but I think this has been a really great discussion.
Yeah, we have about 5 more minutes, so.
Okay, well, there's the answer key. Everyone got everything right. And then lastly, we have just a creative writing activity that can just be done in the next few minutes. We can take a few minutes to rewrite some of these fictional stereotypes. What would you do to subvert the stereotype? Would you change a major plot point, flesh out a character? So just take a couple of minutes, imagine you're watching a movie or reading a book and you're coming across one of these stereotypes or any stereotype. And like, what would you do to subvert the stereotype or change it? And if you have any thoughts, you can also just call them out.
As a Mexican, I think about the spicy Latina thing a lot. And with that, I mean, this is also just like a general, like, women being angry is never allowed in popular media. So for me, like, I would want to write a story where like that anger or frustration is taken seriously and not seen as like a spicy, love my women feisty. I hate that. I hate it so much.
See, and kind of in that vein, if like a fire elemental super hero person wasn't angry, like what if they were sad and quiet all the time? I'd love to see that, because you never do. If they're fire elemental magic, they're always angry, always spicy. Drives me nuts.
Carmen Brammer, you had your hand up?
Yes.
Yes, I was going to say similar to what Annalise, did I say that right, or I butchered your name? I apologize. It's the angry Black woman, right? That's a typical, and she's always strong and tough and, you know, that kind of stuff. We really need to change that narrative a lot. It is too prevalent in this, in our society.
So you and I have talked about stuff like that, I think, because Carmen and I know each other. The Carmens, right? Here's the funny thing. It calls to mind the quote from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, the danger of a single narrative, right? So not to eschew that Black women are strong, right? Because we are, but just that they're within all groups, not just, you know, Black women or, you know, whatever the group might be. Within all groups, there need to be, you know, a plethora of stories. We need to have some you know, a breath of stories, just mix it up. Because there's no one group is a monolith, that's for sure. So I'm glad you brought that up, Carmen. But, you know.
As a American historian student, it was really interesting to me. I read a book called Laboring Women by, okay, I'm gonna have to look this up, but it talks about where some of the origins of the angry Black woman actually comes from. Same with genealogical fictions that also brought it up, is because it was they were always depicted that way, like, you know, hundreds of years ago, to add to the, you know, they're strong enough to work in the fields because they have that like masculine tendency to get angry. They're strong. Like, it's okay, we can totally subjugate them and make them work a lot because they have that oomph to them. And it was really fascinating because, especially like genealogical fictions, it was all about colonial Mexico and how in colonial Mexico they had like images called, they were like casta paintings. And so they would have depictions of each mixture of like marriage and child. And so all of the Black women were seen as angry, but that's how they were depicted. So it was very eye-opening that it went all the way back that far in like colonial Mexico. Like, I hadn't thought about it being like colonial Mexico. But anyways.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
oh, sorry. You go.
I was going to say thank you for that. I did not know that history. Now you sparked a thought. I got to do some research now.
Yeah, casta paintings, genealogical. I can't remember the person's name. I'll look it up. But yes, continue, Annalise.
I recently read a book. It's called The Broken Spears. It's like an indigenous account of the conquest of Mexico, basically. colonization of Mexico. And it was really interesting in that, like, even in Aztec indigenous writing, there's really racist treatment towards the Africans that the Spanish brought. And I always like wondered where that would have even come from, because that was like their first time they'd ever interacted with Africans to begin with. And so to me, it seems like, I am assuming, I don't know, it doesn't go into the book, that like Spanish treatment of their enslaved persons inherently led to the idea that the Aztecs could treat them that way as well, or like look down on them. And so like these stereotypes go like to the beginning. It's insane.
Yep. It's because so genealogical fictions goes into that actually a good amount, because like the Aztecs, to be able to have any power whatsoever in society in colonial Mexico, you had to be like Christian and Spanish, and you had to be like the right type of Christian, and you had to be like old blood Spanish. And so like the Aztecs, they essentially created their own version of that, saying like, oh, well, our people were the first to convert and we've been good Christians ever since. And so it was this, they were distancing themselves to be on a similar level with the white Spanish colonizers. And so it was the like, okay, well, we're better than the African slaves. So they, and it was the first time they had seen someone with like that dark of skin. And so they kind of absorbed it, but they also used it to their advantage. Like they absorbed that ideology, but then also used that ideology to their advantage to increase their own status. So it's a very good book. I put the title and the author in the chat, but yeah. So any last comments? We're at 4. So
yeah, we're at 4:01. So I do want to honor everyone's time. Thank you, Alex and Natalie, very much for presenting this material. And thanks to all of you for attending, and those of you who stayed for the breakout rooms, the scary breakout room session. Thanks to those of you who stayed all the way through. And we hope this was a useful and enjoyable day for all of you.